Now, Ackie monitors have to be one of the most popular dwarf monitor species on the market, staying at a relatively small size while still retaining these beautiful colors and of course that monitor lizard intelligence. It's no wonder why they're so sought upon. And while yes, these monitors still stay at a pretty compact, small size, anywhere from equivalent to the size of, say, a bearded dragon, their care requirements and husbandry as far as enclosure goes is a little bit more complicated than one with some of the beginner reptiles, to which point I feel like if there are just some things that you need to do in order for that species to thrive. Thought I'd take today and make a video going everything you're going to need to know on how to set up an Ackie monitor enclosure. And then with all that being said, I guess it's time to sit back, talk about some monitor lizards, and what was that last part? Oh, also, roll the intro. First thing to go over as far as an Ackie monitor enclosure is going to be, of course, what size you're using. You gotta know that. We gotta start somewhere, and of course, I believe the actual enclosure would be the best place to start. Now, when getting into Ackie monitors, I guess this is really dependent on what age and size your animal is. Of course, with most of these species being captive bred and born, so most likely you're getting a baby Ackie monitor, I feel an enclosure such as the Exoterra large, you know, that 36 by 18 by 18, or even spanning a little higher, maybe the large tall, which would be that 36 by 18 by 24, would be perfect for a baby and utilizing, keeping it still a little bit more secure where until it has that point to gain the confidence to get into a larger enclosure, while also having a little bit more room to grow, roam around, and also again adding that little bit of height so it can climb. Of course, as your Ackie monitor grows in age and size, you can usually transport that from that 36 by 18 up into something like, let's say, a 4 by 2 by 2. Currently, that is what I am housing my pair in. I do have a pair of Ackies inside this 4 by 2 by 2. They are roughly 8 to 9 months old, so they're doing pretty well in this. They're still having some room to go around, you know, only spanning around that, they're only about like this big, so it's plenty of room at this point. Of course, while some people state that the 4 by 2 by 2 is a fine method for an adult, as far as a breeding pair would go, or even as an adult, you can always go bigger with such of these enclosures. Personally for me, once my pair becomes that adult size and that adult age, we will be transferring them down or up into a 6 foot by 3 foot by 3 foot enclosure, being able to give them a lot more span of room, more branches to climb on, more cork tubes and burrows to tunnel into, just a lot more enrichment for the animal inside that larger setup. Now, while some of you should be thinking, Dakota, why wouldn't I just throw it right into the 6 by 3 by 3? You know, why would I spend this money on this enclosure to this enclosure to this enclosure? While on paper that does make sense, I have found personally over the years that really is not the case. As these animals stay with this pretty small size and of course the least amount of confidence as goes with baby reptiles, you really find that, at least in my experience, putting it into too large of an enclosure too quickly is, in a nutshell, a recipe for disaster. The animal is not going to have the confidence to thrive inside these larger setups. You're going to find them trying to wedge themselves in the closest corner in the back, not really utilizing anything as far as basking areas, things like this. Feeding would go down, at least in my personal experience, to the point where I felt utilizing a smaller enclosure to make sure while they feel that security at a younger age in order to gain that confidence to get into the larger setups. If I went too fast with this explanation, you're thinking to yourself, Dakota, that doesn't really make much sense. I got this video right here I made. It's about 10-12 minutes long. You can check it out if you want to learn more about confidence in monitor lizards and utilizing smaller enclosures to then get into larger setups. However, I think that's enough talking about boxes. I think we should actually get into, you know, how to set up the enclosure. And now that we have the appropriate size enclosure to get started, we really should get into, you know, what to fill the enclosure with and how to set it up. So starting out, of course, we are gonna have this empty 4 by 2 for instance. The main thing we're gonna be talking about starting is, of course, what substrate to use. Now, definitely, I recommend using an actual substrate for these animals. Of course, this isn't, I know with all, you know, the bearded dragon, leopard gecko talk, paper towels, whatever else they use, I don't really look too much into it. Ackie monitors do require a fairly deep substrate that you're going to want to provide. Personally for me, I'm using an actual layer method. So to get a little bit more in depth in that, the bottom layer, which is about the first 2 to 3 inches, I'm utilizing a topsoil peat moss mix, and then going further up, ranging less peat moss, more topsoil, to then the top of that around when you get to the 10 to 14 inch mark is going to be mostly made up of topsoil and sand mixture. I found this to be best just for the fact that, of course, with Ackie monitors being a burrowing species, they're going to be burrowing down, and while getting down, and then they're going to want to control more humidity. Being able to utilize that humidity, not just the ambient, but having those microclimates in the actual substrate, I find to be pretty well, I guess needed would be the best term, maybe not, but in personal experience, I find it's the best way to do it. So of course, pretty much how I do it is bottom layer, couple inches, topsoil peat moss, couple inches of just plain topsoil, couple more inches of topsoil sand mix, and then you get this nice sandy mixture that goes into this deeper wet mixture of humidity, microclimate goodness. As far as how much substrate to actually put inside the enclosure, it seems to be quite a bit of controversy about that, especially with breeding Ackies. There seems to be a big tug of war of you need that exact amount of substrate, of course that 12 plus inches of dirt inside the entire enclosure to make sure that your animal has the proper nesting spots. I've seen people utilize less substrate while also creating a nesting box out of some sort of tote bin, things like this. Personally for me, I filled the whole thing up. I have the dirt and all the mix ready to go, so we got about 14 inches of substrate in there for those babies. Once they move into that larger setup, of course that 6x3, I'll be utilizing even more substrate because, you know, fuck it, you know, I got all the substrate, why don't I just use it? And of course, once you have your substrate layered down, it's time to move into the next step, which is of course filling the enclosures with some enrichment things for your Ackie monitor to enjoy. Now the funny thing I find with Ackie monitors is they not only enjoy burrowing down deep into the substrate, they also enjoy utilizing some climbing areas, which is a little ironic, you know. They like to go under and above at the same time. With that being said, I love utilizing some sort of cork tunnels, cork bark, getting it actually into the substrate where the animal feels like it's burrowing down into some sort of tunneling system. While also that, I utilize a couple of different branches spanning at different heights, making the animal able to get above the ground and above that substrate. So of course, not only do we have those tunnels going into the substrate, above the substrate, a couple different heights for them to go to, we are also utilizing a couple of just branches I found from my local conservation area where they're able to climb up, get up in there. I found them utilizing pretty much all of it, whether they be in the ground, underneath the water bowl, underneath some tunnels, inside the tunnels, above the actual place on those branches. They really use every inch of what you provide for them. And with Ackie monitors needing a fairly high basking area, you're gonna wanna utilize something that is able to absorb that heat. Personally for me, actually instead of going with slate stone, I decided to go with a cinder block. I can't remember what the word is of what the Ackie monitor is using. Please leave me down in the comment, I'll explain it right now if you know what it is. It's pretty much a shelving system, and so what we have here is basically a bunch of 2x4s and flat, what is it, sheet wood, whatever. Here's a picture of it. Pretty much to where they're able to tunnel into these individual things, where you're actually having a basking gradient inside the bastion itself while also not spanning through the entire enclosure. So of course, while we're also getting those temperature gradients going from the cool end to the hot end, we're actually creating a basking gradient going downward. So of course, that top spot hitting that around 125 to 135, then going down to lower spots, the animal is actually able to optimize whatever it wants its basking temps to be utilizing this type of shelf system. While I'm not necessarily using wood, I found these cinder blocks to actually do pretty much the exact same thing. We have this perfect basking platform that's able to absorb that heat to that optimal basking temperature, while also having these little slots in there where they can have this little secured little tunneled area that also creates a nice little temperature gradient microclimate. I find it to be pretty rad. Eventually I'll probably switch over to the wooden build one just because it looks a little more aesthetically pleasing just having a random cinder block in there, but as the time goes, this seems to really do the job, and they seem to be loving being able to not only bask on top, but also get into those little slots to hide into. And well, I think that's pretty much all you need to get as far as, you know, a basic Ackie monitor enclosure goes. Pretty much what we're gonna do now, I know you got little snippets of in the B-roll, but we're actually gonna create a little montage right here giving a full example of how I actually have my Ackie monitor set up, and well, then we're gonna roll out the outro. So with that being said, let's get out of this chair and let's actually check out the enclosure that our Ackie monitors are in. Guys, there you have it. How to set up your Ackie monitor's enclosure. I think we did pretty well here, but hey, let me know in the comment section, you know, what did you think of the video? Did I knock it out of the park? Was this a pretty swell video and you got all the information you needed, or did I miss some stuff? Maybe there was something I didn't go over that you want to know more about. Leave me in the comment section, let me know. Was this video good? Was it crap? I won't know until you tell me. And as always, just want to give a huge shout out to Zen Habitats. If you're unfamiliar with Zen Habitats, they are an aftermarket enclosure maker for reptiles. They make some wonderful designs like this one right here. I mean, just check that thing out. If you're interested in getting a 4x2x2 for your Ackie monitors, Zen Habitats is definitely a place to be. Of course, they actually include shipping in their prices, which means it's a one-click, one-stop thing. You're not getting hit with that X amount of shipping price on top of what the total of the enclosure is, which really makes it a little bit easier. If you're interested in checking out some of the enclosure sizes they make, you can find that right down there in the description at Zen Habitats. Let's get into the other stuff. And as always, if you liked the video, please feel free to give us a thumbs up. If you want to see some more of my animals or my breeding products, you can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, DBCB Exotics. We're also on TikTok. If you like some cool merch designs like these three right here, you can find those down there at Teespring in the description, where we also have Patreon, patreon.com/dbcbexotics, where you're gonna find everything behind the scenes of what we're doing here. That includes the multitude of different breeding products that I'm going with, including, you know, ball pythons, monitor lizards, tokay geckos, a couple different new Caledonian geckos. We have a lot going on over here, and you definitely don't wanna miss it. Of course, you get up-to-date updates on everything happening in here. First dibs on some of the babies I produce. You get discounts on the merch and even the merch on the babies I produce. That's about it. There's a bunch of cool stuff, a bunch of different tiers, starts as low as $1 a month. You can check that down there in the description, where your name actually gets to be in the outro that we are gonna be rolling right now.